Good afternoon, and this meeting will come to order. Welcome to the June 4th meeting of the Rutherford County School Board. Everyone is welcome. Tonight, leading our Pledge of Allegiance will be one of our fine educators, Emily Mitchell. Ms. Mitchell, if you'll come forward.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Mitchell, how long have you been with Rutherford County? How long have you been with Rutherford? And this is the first time you've got to lead the pledge, is that correct? So, okay. Thank you so much. We have three families to remember in our moment of silence this evening. If you would, the following families, we would appreciate your attention. Mr. Harris Hooper, who passed away on May 28th of this year, just last month. Mr. Hooper was a retiree from our school system. He served as a teacher, coach, and principal. After his retirement at 95, he continued to serve as a member of the Rutherford County School Board. He was the husband of Penny Hooper, a retiree of the school system as a special education coordinator, and the family of Kelly Goosetree, who is our principal at Browns Chapel Elementary. Her husband, Jeffrey Goosetree, passed away on Sunday, May 24th, after a brief battle with cancer. And Mr. Jordan brought to our attention that Carol Thompson, one of the first coaches at Riverdale High School, passed away last week. So if you would, ladies and gentlemen, join the board in a moment of silence. Remember these individuals and family. Thank you, everyone. If you'll give me just a second, I forgot to turn my phone off, and I'll take care of that real quick. Okay. Again, my apologies. Approval of the agenda.
Second.
Hodge and Mr. Holliday. Any further discussion? Of course, we had a work session on Tuesday. Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Approval of the consent agenda.
So moved.
Ms. Moore, thank you. And Mr. Estes for second. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We have a visitor tonight, Mr. Scott Cosmore. Mr. Cosmore, if you'll come to the mic, the podium, and we welcome you. You've been with us before. You're familiar with the blue sheet and some of the rules, and you have 3 minutes. And of course, we have the little gizmo up there now.
Sure.
And,
sure.
Of course, you always have access to board members and the director of schools too. And but we're again welcome, and
Thank you.
Share your thoughts.
Thank you. Board, esteemed guests, my name is Scott Cosmore. I have 5 children, 3 of them currently in Rutherford County Schools, 2 of them at Withwart Buchanan, and 1 of them at Buchanan Elementary. I had an interesting experience about 3-4 weeks ago, and that was one of my children came home from school after a TCAP test, which I thought was just like any other TCAP test, and he informed me that a very significant part of the test was incorporated Islam. And not only that, but he had to read out of the Quran, the actual Quran. And it was an online test. And so I asked him, how much time did you spend in Islam in your current social studies curriculum. And he said, man, it had maybe 1 chapter or 2 chapters at the most. And he said, there's just a lot more questions than we had ever thought would ever been on there. And I said, well, that's interesting. I don't understand that, but once again, I'm not in charge of the test. So I immediately called Mr. Kubley here in Rutherford County, very helpful man. And he shared my concerns. He did not think that there was an inordinate amount of questions on the test regarding Islam, and I think he was very adamant that my child didn't have to read out of the Quran. He said he'd research it, and he did. He got back to me within a couple days, and he said out of the 61 questions, there was 8 questions on Islam, which is, to me, proportionally a little greater than should be, but he did say that my son did not have to read out of the Quran, and I said, well, that's weird, because my son said he did. And so I asked him if he had to read out of the Bible, and he said, nope. I said, okay, that's interesting. I don't understand where this is going. So Mr. Kubley pointed me to the Tennessee Department of Education, and Deb, I guess her name is Deb Malone Sauberer. And Deb, I finally, after getting voicemail and playing phone tag with her, she basically said, well, we have to apologize to you, Mr. Cosmore. I said, why is that? She goes, well, your son did have to read out of the Quran. And I said, and who made that decision? And she goes, well, it wasn't me. I did not know that that the test incorporated that. I said, you're the executive director of testing, and you didn't know. And she said, well, it didn't really matter because there was 10 field tests. And I said, why multiple tests? Well, we're trying some new stuff out. And I said, well, help me understand this. How many of the tests incorporated the Quran? She said 2 out of the 10 tests. And I said, and you didn't know about it. I said, would you mind if I could just come and see the test in private? I won't bring a camera. I won't bring a phone. I just want to read it. No, you're not allowed. I said, I'm not allowed to see the test that was put in front of my son. And she said, no. And so I want to make a formal request now, and I don't know if this has been done already. I know that Ms. Moore and Mr. Blair are working on stuff like this. But the transparency issue within the Tennessee Department of Education was an issue. And I'm making a formal request to see not only that test, but all other 9 tests that were presented to our 7th graders in Rutherford County. Okay?
Sir.
Thank you.
I don't know that there's really a response.
I mean, we don't have copies. I don't know. The state would have to release them to us, would be the only thing. And
We have a TCA issue too, so I think it's going to be more of a communication issue between.
there's a bill in the legislature, and I shared this with Ms. Moore, that was introduced this year, that tests would be released after they were given, and ACT does, every year, so it's not unheard of to do it. That bill, as best we can tell, we looked to see where it was, and it did not pass this year, but it's still in committee. And since the Tennessee legislature is a biennium, that bill's not dead. It wasn't withdrawn or anything like that. So it is still, my assumption is still alive in that committee and may come up first next year. But the bill specifically was for that reason, to remove or to allow parents and other people to see it, to remove that restriction. That's the current Tennessee law basically says it cannot be shared except for unauthorized sharing, whatever that means.
Well, if I could respond to this.
Mm-hmm.
I've done a lot of research on this, and looking at the verbiage, it just said authorized copy distribution. I wasn't asking for a copy test. I was just asking for authorized
See.
to confirm what I'm being told, and it still says no. So I understand the position you're in, but as a parent, I certainly think that it's within the boundaries of common sense. I know field testing count for the grade, but ultimately these tests.
Mr. Cosmore, and I'll be happy to meet with you and talk with you more after the meeting too. Okay? All right. Thank you. Moving on to number 7.
Number 7, and I would ask Mr. Luker, would you step up to the mic just a moment, please? I'd like to introduce to you Mr. Steve Luker, who is the new principal of Smyrna Middle School, which will certainly be there in 15-16, and he is transferring from David Urey Elementary School He has background in high school and middle school. In fact, you taught at Smyrna Middle School once upon a time. You want to tell us a little bit about that, if you would?
Miss Michaels, you lied to me. You said I didn't have to make a speech. She told me, she said, you have to make a speech. I said, okay. And yeah, I was at Smyrna Middle School back in, I left in 94, spring of 94. So it's a homecoming. And things are a little different now. And, you know, I'm excited about it. We're going to try to, you know, have focus and, you know, have a good school that's important to our community, and it is an important school to our community. I'm excited about being there. I've been there this week. I've met a lot of the teachers. You know, we're just getting started, so I've been there 2.5 days, so my head's kind of spinning right now. But I'm looking forward to it and working with you guys, so I appreciate it.
How long were you at David Urey?
I was there 7 years.
You certainly had an impressive stint there, so thank you for the work.
Well, I appreciate it. We had a good school at David Urey, and you know, you have to separate your emotions when you leave a school. As Mr. Odom knows, he was at David Urey for many years. You have to separate that emotions from leaving a school like that, because those people that you work with every day become, they're important to you, and they're part of your family. Mr. Odom was there 18 years. I was there 7. I was the second longest tenured principal at that school. So I'm right behind you anyway, Mr. Odom.
Ms. Mitchell didn't cheer when you left or anything like that?
Yep. Yep. But I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, you know, they say challenges keep you young, so hopefully you...
They do, and there's good people there, and I've gotten emails from former people that I've taught with and worked with at Smyrna Middle, and you know, they've said great things about Smyrna Middle, so it's going to be a great experience. It's going to be a challenge, but it's going to be something that, you know, anything that's worth having is worth working for.
Congratulations.
All right, thank you.
Board members, with your approval, Mr. Odom is going to do the spotlight this evening, and I think we'd probably be well served to move you down and take care of some of the other in case anyone needs to leave. And but we'll move you to after facilities, but before insurance. Would that be okay?
No problem.
Okay. And we'll go to number 9.
Number 9 under old business is the floor machine bid number 3111. Under bid 3111, previously approved by the board at the March 19, 2015 board meeting, 2 types of floor scrub machines under this bid were awarded to Lebanon Chemical. Due to issues that have emerged with Lebanon Chemical, the staff recommends rescinding the award of the 2 items under the bid to Lebanon Chemical, and to instead award the bid for those 2 items to Cosgrove Global as the lowest and best bidder. The recommended approval, the motion is to rescind the award to the 20-inch square scrub machine and 28-inch square scrub machine to Lebanon Chemical, and to award the same to Cosgrove Global as the lowest and best bidder.
The recommendation?
So move.
Okay, we've got Mr. Michaels, you can pick, because I think we had about 2 or 3 that all said at the same time. So, okay, we have a motion. Can we have a second to be said? And Ms. Moore is a second. So, okay. Discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, B.
B, and Mr. Tack is with us tonight, so let me kind of read this, and then y'all may want to ask some questions. CPR and first aid training. On April 16, 2015, the board approved a motion to require 50% of each athletic activity staff be certified in both CPR and first aid as of August 1, 2015. By June 1, 2016, all members of athletic activity staffs would be required to be certified in both. Athletics were defined as all TSSAA and TMSAA sanctioned sports, including swimming. Activities were defined as marching band and junior ROTC. Mr. Tackett met with the athletic directors on May 12, 2015 to discuss adjusting the board action concerning CPR and first aid certification for coaches and sponsors. Mr. Tackett, on behalf of the system's athletic directors, recommends using the same model that is used for lifeguard certifications for swimming. There must be a certified lifeguard for a certain number of swimmers. A second lifeguard must be added when the number is surpassed. The definition for athletics and activities would remain the same under the new model. The August 1st, 2015 compliance date would remain the same under the new model. The revision would require one CPR and one first aid certified coach or sponsor for athletic events and activities involving 25 students or less, and a minimum of 2 CPR and first aid certified coaches sponsors would be required for athletic events and activities involving 26 or more students. So we have 2 motions. The first one is to rescind the board action taken on April 16, 2015 regarding CPR, first aid certification for athletic and activity coaches and sponsors. The second motion is to approve the revised model requiring 1 CPR and 1 first aid certified coach sponsor for athletic events and activities involving 25 students or less, and 2 certified coaches or sponsors for athletic events and activities involving 26 students or more. The definition for athletic activities and events will remain the same. The compliance date of August the 1st, 2015 will also remain the same. Mr. Tackett, you want to come up and let them, I think Mr. Holliday may have had a question or something banned.
Welcome, Mr. Tackett.
Thank you.
He's our athletic director.
If I could just make a couple of statements up front. First of all, I think when we talk about TSSAA sanctioned sports, sometimes we don't recognize that swimming is not part of TSSAA. That's why swimming is there. It is separate and always has been, and I think it's a situation that's worked well for swimming and TSSAA, so that all works out well, but I clearly think swimming needs to be part of that. And my experience through marching band and seeing how much activity they are, sometimes I kind of question sometimes that we don't have more restrictions there because of, in July particularly, those kids are out there 6, 7, 8 hours a day in the heat, and I think that clearly they're probably exposed to as much or more risk than many of our athletic teams would be. Second thing I would like to state is the meeting that we held with athletic directors on May the 12th was one of 2 meetings we hold every year biannually. It was not called to discuss this issue. It was just brought up in that discussion, and athletic directors asked if we might discuss a change. And so we did look at that, and I'm the one that suggested, along with Brad Rowling from NHC, who does our athletic trainers, the first motion. So, but I looked at it in their thoughts, and I really like the idea sometimes that when we get a chance to listen to our people, I think we probably need to do so. It clearly was not designed to change to in any way minimize our dedication to what it is we're trying to do. It's just a matter of can we accomplish what we want to do in a new model as opposed to what we had prior to. I think we do need to recognize, and maybe the language should reflect this, and certainly the language I sent out to athletic directors today does reflect this. This is to require them to be present. This doesn't mean just 1 or 2 staff members be certified, but it would require 1 or 2, whichever the number happens to be present. So if you've got a marching band, for example, you're going to need more than 2 people to be certified, because if one of those persons that's certified can't be there, someone else would have to be there to do that. So you clearly are going to need more than your minimum number of persons per activity to be certified, just in case that person can't be there. So I think when you get into volleyball, for example, at the middle school level, where you probably only have 1 coach, that person's going to have to be certified to hold the practice. If for some reason that coach can't be there to hold the practice and you're going to have someone else come in and kind of guide them through it, you just need to make sure that you've got a certified person. It might be the baseball coach that happens to be there, but someone would need to be there to take care of that. But there's in no way are we looking to just certify 1 or 2 people per staff. We want to make sure that we certify enough people that those persons, in fact, would be present. And I'm not sure our language there reflects it as much as maybe it should. But that's my statements, and I'll be glad to now entertain questions or thoughts on that.
Did you have one regarding band, Mr. Holliday?
I understand the intent that the athletic directors and Mr. Tackett are driving at here. It is a dramatically different proportion between, as we discussed Tuesday evening, a minimum of 5 and perhaps 7 or 8 coaches with our largest athletic activity would probably be football, 45 to 80 participants on the field. 5 to 8 coaches, 45 to 80 participants. With band, 75 to 150, 2 directors. I raised the question on Tuesday evening. I think it is a routine occurrence, and we only have 2 staff members. Now, we may have other non-staff approved, people that have gone through some process, whether or not they're CPR and first aid trained, would be yet another event. But I think it's reasonable that, hey, I need to cut out 30 minutes early, one director to another, I'll finish up rehearsal tonight. It's something that occurs, and if we're not careful, this could, in an unintended way, say, well, wait, we've got to stop practice right here because we're out of step with board policy. It's a concern of mine. I don't know if it's a non-starter.
I think one thing we should recognize, we are, with any policy we're doing here, we're going above and beyond what TSSAA requires to do at all. We have none. I think another question that really comes from this, Mr. Holliday, is we have no restriction on how many coaches have to be there, whether certified or not, to take certification out of the process. But how many coaches need to be there, or staff members need to be there for whatever the activities could be. In theory, if we take this policy away, in theory, one band director could be there for 150 kids.
And I think that occurs.
Ratio is not good, for sure. I know this. I had the question the other day, can we find some way to get another assistant coaching position for cross country, because that's an activity that in many schools has lots and lots of kids, because you don't cut people from cross country typically. If you want to run cross country, you come run cross country, because it's an individual kind of a sport. We have no ratio that says if you've got 75 kids out there running cross country, you've got to have 2 coaches, 3 coaches, 4 coaches, 5 coaches. I mean, I think taking this out of the equation, I do think that there's something there to be looked at as to what we should require. Of course, if you as a board require it, then I think you as a board need to find some way to fund it. I mean, it's kind of difficult to say if you got 75 kids, we're only going to give you 1 coach funded to do that. So that'd be the case. Now, from my experience, Mr. Estes, I know is coached, Mr. Jordan's coached at the school level. My experience is the likelihood of a need for first aid or CPR for 1 student in a practice is pretty rare. 2 is, at the same time, is almost unthinkable. And if you've got 2 there for your 75 kids or so, the likelihood of that happening is extremely rare. But the likelihood of having a third occurrence needed, where a third person would have to tend to, well, he's tending to this one and this one's tending to this one, we've got a third one falling out. The ADs and myself included don't think that that's a likely scenario at all.
We heard the description in our last board meeting. We were just really had the pleasure of hearing the Stewart's Creek Middle School Jazz Band. Mm-hmm. And in the presentation, the director said that among other activities, the Stewart's Creek Middle School had played at, I think, 4 football games. There's only 1 band director at Stewart's Creek Middle School. I think I'm correct in saying that. And I don't know how many students are there, but that's not necessarily marching band, but it is outdoor. There's some nuances here that I think in athletics, I understand. The lifeguard model, it works, it's appropriate, it's there, I like it. I think that there's an inherent ratio. I think that you will find occurrences. I don't even think it would be hard to ask our band directors, how often has it been 1 director with 150 students? I think that it has occurred more than a handful of times every fall because of personal conflicts or something like that, and I worry about the implications of this.
But you're discussing that as if we don't have a policy about CPR or first aid at all.
No, but our current policy is that everyone be certified. Am I right?
Correct. Yeah,
okay, so if they're certified, their presence is neither here nor there. but everyone is certified, therefore it's assumed that they would be present. But this policy adds a contingency of must be present in order for activity to occur. And that change is where I've got, you know, and reading it specifically, it really doesn't say that, because what it says is, I know the intent is that they must be present, but what it says is that that 2 certified coach sponsors for athletic events or activities involving 26 students or more, that there just must be. They don't necessarily have to be present.
And I stated in my first presentation, I think that we probably should look at language that would be sure to indicate that must be present would be part of the policy.
Well, yeah, and when we go to must be present, then the band thing just becomes an issue. I think it may become an issue, or I may be squinting at gnats.
Mr. Hodge?
Question I would have, because I don't know a whole lot about bands, but based on a lot of these approvals we give, you know, each meeting or whatever, it looks like we've got an awful lot of volunteers. When they serve the same purpose, getting them trained?
Yes,
I mean, they would qualify.
they would, yes.
I don't know how many band people, I mean, how many volunteers they have, but I could see us getting them people trained. It's hard for me to believe that out of practice, you got 150 students, you don't have any more than one adult there. I mean, I don't know. I mean,
And that was my thought too, as committed as the band parents are to that program. I don't know anything about band either. You know, are they there? And if they are, then that could take care of, that could be a solution.
Well, as I say, I think we may be thinking in 2 separate ways. I mean, I think at some point in time, the board, or we need to consider what ratio do we have to have for student
Safety.
whether they're certified or not. I do know this, in a typical marching band setting, the band that the size that's 100, 120, they're going to have 6 to 7 to 8 staff there at every practice and every game. I mean, that's what will be there. The idea that one person will be there for 150 kids is pretty foreign. But right now, there's no board policy that suggests that couldn't happen.
The typical profile of those additional paid or volunteer staff members, I think, is a whole lot different than what we find in assistant coaches. And again, I guess I'll offer a solution rather than just pointing out issues here. I think it would be appropriate for this policy to go into effect for athletics. It answers the needs for the athletic directors that they have asked for us from. And I think that a separate policy be in place for activities, specifically marching band and JROTC, where those Rutherford County employees who are stipend and accountable for those activities be trained. And whether or not they be present and at what ratio they be present be an issue that is not part of this policy, but certainly a concern.
If I could speak to that too. There are swimming, not a Tennessee recognized sport as such. We also have, last time I checked, Mr. Tackett, I know we had archery.
Sure.
We've had people play hockey, schools combined. We've had rugby. What do we do about those? If they're obviously athletics, but do we consider them activities?
Rugby and hockey, either one. Rugby for sure. I don't know that we've got hockey here or not, but rugby for sure has to go through use of facilities forms, and they are totally separately and outside of the school jurisdiction. Those are use of facilities people that come in, pay $1 to use the field, just as Boy Scouts would use it, just like a church would use it, so forth. We have no jurisdiction over rugby at all. It's not part of what we do. They don't come through me as athletic director. That is a outside sport, so rugby would not be part of that. Archery is. And the question happens to be, you know, when we get into activities, why marching band in ROTC is because those are activities to me that spend a great deal of time outside in large activity. I don't think archery fits that. Frankly, bowling is a TSSAA sanctioned sport. I'm not sure how necessary it is to have a CPR person at a bowling event, as an example. But I think it fits neatly in our little package here. But swimming specifically was added because it is an activity, aside from archery, aside from trap shooting, where the likelihood of a need for a CPR or first aid event may occur. Now, in swimming, frankly, because of their lifeguard rules that they have, that's already going to happen, because they have to have one lifeguard there, just as these rules indicate, and they have to have a second lifeguard there with 26 or more. I don't have lifeguard certification, but I've got to assume that a lifeguard is certified in CPR and first aid. So swimming is going to get covered by this same rule. But the rule there, the swimming is used, and that's why this model was suggested. They have one or two, depending on whatever that happens to be, but they don't go beyond that. But I'm glad to work with the board at whatever level that you guys feel like we need to do. I will say this, the policy we have right now that says 50%, it doesn't say that they have to be present either. So in theory, you could have 8 people in a staff, 4 people that are certified aren't there, 4 people that are certified are there. You have no coverage at all as compared to. I do think we need to make sure we at least imply, if we don't specifically state, we're talking about people being present, whatever the number happens to be.
Let me ask you a question, and I think we need to get this down to the real world and either defer this back for more study or I don't believe we're going to be able to find the people to man this as it is written. Okay, just being practical about it, but. It wasn't that long ago that I was at Riverdale for a football game, and Blackman was over there, and rumor has it that they're pretty competitive. I'm not really sure that that's accurate. But at any rate, being serious, I always stand on the opposite side from the home crowd, so Riverdale is well known. And Blackman, I don't know, 70, 80 players. Full band, which was so large it spilled over onto the track. Blackman has a world-renowned cheerleader program. They've won like 3 national championships. The Blackman dance team was there. Now, how many trained CPR people are we talking about here? And Riverdale's got an equal number of those people that are present for that one football game on a Friday night. I don't know where those people are going to come from that we can train, and I sort of agree with Mr. Hodge about the volunteers. We can't hold them to the same standards sometimes that we would hold an employee whose check we write. Okay, am I way off base here, Mr. Tackett? I know you'll be quick to tell me, maybe.
Well, I think we need to hold the volunteer coaches to the same standard we do our. As a matter of fact, they go through background checks and all those kind of things too. So I would not want to say we don't hold them to the same standard. And, I don't know what the pleasure of the board is as far as what we need to do. We can move away from it altogether and not require any first aid CPR people to be there, which is where we are now, which is where most schools are now, where TSSAA expects us to be now. So we don't have to do any of this stuff. Whatever we're doing, we're going above and beyond whatever is required to do. But I do think it's for the safety of our kids.
Mr. Hodge?
I've got 2 questions. Most of these sports, do they have more than one person that's certified? A coach or volunteer or anything like that?
Certified.
As far as first aid goes, CPR.
As of right now, they don't have. The only person has to be trained at all right now is the non-faculty volunteer, because through the TSSAA process, they have to go through a first aid training. They don't get a first aid certification, but they do have to go through a first aid online class and pass that to get it. So if a non-faculty volunteer actually has more first aid training than we require of a regular coach right now.
The coaches, are they trained, I guess?
Not right now.
We had the first training this week. I did see it.
Yeah, I mean, they're in the process of being trained. And as I say, Mr. Jordan, to your point, there was no pushback from them at all on the 50% and 100%. As far as the number of people to get trained. I think what you're facing is In your bigger sports is where you're looking at a difference. I mean, in volleyball, where you got 1 or 2 coaches, they're both going to have to get certified. They just are. If you've got a small staff of 1 or 2, everybody's going to have to be certified under either model. You're really talking about the bigger sports where you're looking and say, I got 12 staff. Do I really have to have 6 people there? Or can 3 handle the load? Or can 2 handle the load? In my opinion, in their opinion, I think 2 can, because it's 2 more than right now than what we've dealt with for the last 50 years to do that. But you know, you can set that number. You could certainly set that number to say above 75. You would require a 3rd one if you want to go that direction. Or we can leave it where it's at.
You're talking about a 3rd one, just using that example, at each practice or whatever.
At each, yeah. I mean, at each activity.
Right.
And
What you're telling me, as far as the coaches, as of right now,
as of right now, they don't have
to have any.
That's correct.
So, I guess, just thinking about it, I'm not a lawyer by no means, but I would think we'd probably be looking at a problem.
Well, I'm convinced it's the right thing to do something. The question is to do what? I mean, I don't want to. I'd rather not pull it back and say let's just go back to ground zero and say we don't have to do it. We're not going to do anything.
At this moment, with the policy that we have presently, the compliance date is the same, August 1st. Is that correct? So they're working presently to get everyone certified.
Ms. Delbridge has added, I think, 6 or 7 additional sessions this summer for them to be certified. Yes, I mean that.
So we're moving in the direction of every coach being certified.
Well, the way it's written right now, it asks for 50% by August 1st, and you got to get to the 100% level. You got until next July 1, I believe it is. That's right. So we're working toward the half right now. I don't think changing this model is going to change the number of people that are going to get certified this summer at all. Because as I say, 100% of your volleyball staff is going to have to get certified because you don't have a volleyball staff bigger than 2 probably, which means in order to hold practice, one or the other is going to have to be there. And if Coach Jones gets sick, Coach Smith needs to be there. Both are going to need to be certified to be able to cover that.
May I ask one more question for you, Mr. Holliday? As far as athletic activities, band, archery, golf, all of the above, how many are, if you know, how many are TSSAA, how many activities do we have, and how many are TSSAA, and how many are not?
90% of your sports that you would define, if you want to come up with a list of basketball, football, volleyball, softball, baseball, 90% of what you would have. The ones that would not, that we do sponsor at some level, middle school bowling is not, archery is not, trap is not. I can't think of anything right off the top of my head that would not be TSSAA swimming, as I've already identified that one. So you're looking at most all your traditional sports for sure. Cross country, track, golf, tennis, all those are.
Are band and junior ROTC currently part of the current policy?
That you passed last meeting? Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the sponsored activities have not changed in either way.
And so we're training band directors this summer as well?
That would be correct.
Okay. And middle school band directors?
No, they're not marching band.
Okay.
I have one question. Yes, sir. Mr. Tackett, is all other activities, are they under the same guidelines as football as far as heat index and things like that? If it's reaching a certain heat?
Rutherford County policy, Ms. McLeod, I think, haven't we made that all activities, ROTC, I know that we advertise that we expect all of them to follow. ROTC, for example, is not part of TSSAA, but when we send out our blast for heat index, we expect all Rutherford County activities to follow that policy, whether the TSSAA or not.
Mr. Hodge.
Just one last question. Would it be feasible to basically say anytime there is a practice that we require that sport or whatever the activity is required to have somebody there that is trained? Just like Mr. Holliday said, if the band director has to leave, he shoulder the responsibility to make sure he's got somebody there to cover. And I feel a whole lot better than that. I mean, with that, looking at it that way, at least I know somebody's there during every practice or whatever that's actually has some kind of training.
I think that's what the gist of what this is would require that. As I say, I think be present needs to be probably added to our language.
Okay.
I guess the question is, do you want to, if we want to rewrite and look at some other changes, you got one in place that is active already from April 16th. Or you said remove band and maybe junior ROTC, we could leave it in place. The question is, do you want one with the 26th, or are we talking about more?
Since we have so many questions and comments about it presently, and the compliance date that we've drawn in the plan is August 1, we still need to go with the training, even if we're going with the 50% at this point. Would it please the board? Let's table this and discuss it, and possibly take it a little further, because I don't know that we've all wrapped our brains around the intricacies of this, Mr. Tackett. And it may be that we're better off staying status quo and then taking correction action, here with.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, if you wanted to relook at it, I would think it would be really good for our people by your next board meeting to be able to put a policy in place that they know exactly what they've got to comply with, because right now it's a moving target for them.
Right.
I just think that when school opens up and we have cheerleaders and dance and huge football teams and huge bands and volleyball and cross country and golf, I just think, you're going to turn around one day in late August and you're going to say, according to this, we're going to have 20 people somewhere, sometimes certified, at these various events. And I don't think you're going to be able to find those 20 people. Not you personally. I don't mean you personally. I just think coach is going to look around, and he's going to realize. The baseball coach is not going to welcome this. He's going to say, "I got to stay for volleyball today because I'm certified."
No, I wouldn't think so.
Well, if you need somebody,
but to me, if I'm going to have a baseball practice, I certainly hope I've got a baseball coach there.
Sure, I meant as a volunteer for another sport, or I'm going to have to go to band practice this afternoon and sit out there for 2 hours, not get a dime for it. I just think it's going to be a problem.
Here's my take. I've got a band staff of 10. I'm going to require, as a band director, I can't be there all the time. I've got to have 2. I need to have at least 4 or 5 people on my staff trained. I don't want to have to go to the baseball coach. That shouldn't be the case. Yes, the baseball coach is going to be angry and should be. But if you plan correctly, in the model you got right now, if you got a staff of 10, you're going to have 5. This lessens the load. This kind of, to me, this lessens that number a little bit, kind of gets a little bit back more to what you're trying to aim toward.
Okay.
But
So in my ignorance with band, I don't have musical bone in my body, so the big high schools with these large bands, you have a band director, you have an assistant band director. Do you have football team may have 9 coaches on the field? How many staff members?
if you'll go back to your consent agenda and look at the number of people that were approved tonight as non-faculty volunteers, you're going to find right now what will be approved last meeting, tonight, and your next school board meeting. I'm going to bet you 40% of them are banned.
So you're calling the volunteers.
Absolutely.
Okay, that was
Yes.
the clarity I needed.
Yes.
And that's the clarification. There are 50, 60 guys on the sidelines for a football team. Out of the 9 coaches, 8 of them are Rutherford County employees. there's 150 band students in the stands or on the practice field. Out of the staff of 10, 2 are Rutherford County employees. And that's the discrepancy. Now, what shouldn't be overlooked is an athletic activity is inherently aggressive. You might even say violent. And inasmuch you would anticipate a first aid situation. However, a band activity, you can look at a drill field, and if one of them lays on the ground, it's not because he was tackled, it's because there's a problem. So 1 or 2 people can survey that 100-person activity and assess it correctly. There's not water involved, there's not violent clashing involved, et cetera, but the only thing that's kind of out of proportion is this very, very appropriate lifeguard-inspired threshold of 26 that's correct, because in that violent activity of athletics, you can have an occurrence over here and be addressing that and overlook something over there. We need to set it aside. We need to think about it. We need to come back with the right rationale, and our people will help us do that. We've talked with the athletic directors. We need to talk to a few band directors, and we'll have the right policy.
Is there a motion in there, Mr. Holliday?
No, I think absence of a motion, I'd ask the chairman to close the discussion and move to the next item.
I'm going to need a consensus of the board to do that. So if I can get a consensus of it, we won't take a vote, but I'll just kind of look at the board and see if is there a desire to vote or desire to table and revisit.
That's my question. What are you going to do next? Who's going to do what next? I mean, we're going to bring this back next meeting and talk about it again, or? Are you wanting to have it at our next work session to go in more detail at that point?
If the direction is mine, I'm comfortable making a motion tonight. We add the present language to the motion that's on the table right here, that the certified, trained people not just be certified and trained, but be certified, trained, and present in the ratio that is advised here, 1 to 25, 1 person, 26 and above, 2 people, and I'm totally comfortable with that. I think our athletic departments have weighed in appropriately, and it's correct. But then we have 2 recommended approvals. We strike the language about activities. We leave the definition exactly the same, but we strike the language about activities, and we put a 3rd motion here and say for activities, specifically marching band and junior ROTC, all Rutherford County employees assigned to sponsor these activities will be trained. 100% will be trained. And then let presence take care of itself.
What about that director you were talking about that leaves?
There would always be 1 school employee present, or else the activity cannot occur. But yes, we would have circumstances. We would, in as much as a board, be endorsing a circumstance where 1 certified CPR first aid trained person would potentially be evaluating 150 band students on the field. We're talking about heat exhaustion, we're talking about endurance, and as much as I'm telling you I have perspective on band activities and their ability to, assess that and all that kind of stuff, I'm also telling you, yeah, they can handle it. One director can assess 150 students and see who's in distress.
You just want to exclude band and junior RTC from
the 26 threshold. And in that regard, I would be comfortable making that recommendation and voting in favor of those 3 recommended motions. But I would like a little bit of feedback before we go to a motion that other board members could be content with that. And I'd like to know if Mr. Tackett would be content with that. I mean, because, you know, it's your athletic director, not fine arts director, but we are talking about, I mean, I'm proposing a 1 to 150, not routine, but on occasion assessment of CPR trained. Do you think that that's ill-advised?
No, I will say this, and I've had this discussion with Mr. Odom. I do think that the title, not only at the school level but here, does need to be changed, because I do think I am an activities director as opposed to an athletic director, because, as I said, 40% of the non-faculty personnel that I've dealt with, which takes up 80% of my time these days, are non-athletic people. Somebody has to supervise a little bit of what takes place with activities as well. And band clearly falls in that category. So I'm very comfortable with the idea that we have at least one at any activity. That's one more than we've got right now. If we want to make it one and make the number forever, football, which is the most violent will typically have a trainer there at the high school level. Whatever you do, you're going to have one more than you've got right now. So if you wanted to make it real simple and say we require one certified CPR and first aid at all activities, that makes it simple and clean, and we can change it beyond that if you want to do that in years to come. And that kind of gets at Mr. Jordan's point that we don't have quite as many people to have to deal with at that point in time. If we got one, we got one more than we got right now.
Well, I certainly agree with what Mr. Holliday and Mr. Hodge both said about having someone there. Absolutely, and that a trained person at every one of our activities. I don't think there's any question. And personally, I'd like to have a doctor for every student. I mean, you know, if we could do that. But that not being possible, I think it's a good idea. But this looks to be, well, we may need a reworded motion at some point here. I don't know whether to try to do that right now or at some future date, but I know these people are going through training now. I just talked to a middle school basketball coach the other day, and she was going through it this week, and she was excited about it, you know. So I think we need to continue that training, train as many people as possible. The swimming, I think that's pretty much a policy everywhere, that you have a certain number of lifeguards on duty, and as the number of swimmers goes up, you have more people. That makes sense to me. But whether you need that for band activities, I don't know. I just think we need to reword this motion.
We have a policy in place presently. Our compliance date is August 1st. Our next work session is so that gives us an opportunity for board members to communicate with Mr. Tackett, to talk to Mr. Odom or anyone else that they would feel the need to get their opinion or advice. If there's not an overwhelming objection from the board, let's table this and bring this back to the next work session for discussion. Would that be okay with the board?
Discuss it next work session?
Yes, sir. If that's okay with them.
We probably need, and that's fine with me. But we need to remember as a board that football practice will begin sometime in July, and so we need to have a policy in place.
I really ask the board to go ahead and get this thing settled at your next meeting, especially for coming back. I mean, they get in-service credit for doing this, so it's not like it's wasted time anytime you got someone properly trained. But I would not like to have to go through the process of saying, oh, you've had 7 on your staff trained, and suddenly now you just have to have 1 or 2.
I'm confident that the consensus of this board is to have professionally trained and certified members of these athletic staffs good to go. And but I think we, as a board, needs a little more clarity and maybe contact with you and the director of schools. And, you know, I'm confident that at our next work session and meeting, we can get this resolved and make a decision, Mr. Tackett.
Do you need a motion to table until work session, or we
Didn't
are?
have a second, so I'm not sure you need it. Do you need a table since we didn't have a second? I didn't think so.
Okay.
No, we'll just table it. It's just tabled at this point, so we won't call for a vote.
You don't have to have
Well,
a
wait.
table motion because you didn't have a second.
Yeah, we hadn't, yes, so. Mr. Tackett, you'll be back with us here in just a couple of weeks.
I do invite your input, and I'll talk to a couple of folks as well, but let me know what you think, and we'll see if we can't word this thing out the way it works.
Appreciate your time.
Hey, sure.
Thank you. Okay, number 10.
Number 10 is, again, facilities. This is the Blackman Middle School batting cage. Blackman Middle School principal Will Shelton has requested permission to construct a batting cage adjacent to the baseball field at Blackman Middle School. The cage is approximately 14 feet by 50 feet with a steel frame and nylon net covering, and the approximate cost of material is $2,000. The labor will be done by volunteers. It will be funded through the Booster Club, and the funds are presently available. It will be used for both baseball and softball, therefore there's no gender equity issue. Recommend approval. The motion is to approve construction of a batting cage at Blackman Middle School as presented at no cost to the Rutherford County School Board.
Heard the recommendation? Mr. Estes?
Second.
And Mr. Young. Further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. We will go back to now Spotlight, Mr. Odom. You're going to go. You're going to the podium.
The state is in the process of doing some training for the 10 ready assessments for next year. You know the legislature required them to come up with a different assessment. They did award a bid back in December to Measurement Inc. for English language arts and mathematics. So I thought the board would be interested in seeing some information about this. This is the slides are not mine. I mean, this is what the state's using for training and information. I'll also try to give you some of their statements that follows with that, but it's kind of an overview. It'll give you something if your constituents or others ask that you'll have certainly some beginning knowledge. And so the title of again, this is a state PowerPoint, what you need to know about 10 Ready, Tennessee's new assessment in math and English language arts. As they're saying in this particular case, the reason for this change of test is preparing students for a changing world. The state is saying an authentic assessment is task-oriented rather than just recitation of facts. 10 Ready will focus on the practical application of skills. The idea is if we want Tennessee students to be competitive in a world, then we've got to begin to emphasize more critical thinking and problem solving still rather than rote recitation of information. So 10 Ready asks students to both master basic and explain how these skills are solved. And you're going to see a little bit of that as we go through. They included another, I thought this was an interesting slide to me. It's a graphic that they had. In 2007, the high school freshmen, the cohort tracked in 2007, which would have finished in 2011 in 4 years. In Tennessee, there were 72,865 students. 10,545 students statewide did not graduate from high school. And you're roughly looking at 1 out of 7 there, 1 out of 6 or 7. That's a lot when you think about that. In 2000, that cohort that's entered in 2007. Of those, 22,334 students did graduate from high school and entered the workforce and earn an average salary of $9,030 annually. If you leave without additional skills, you're going to be at a fast food place or something like that, and now they're probably going to keep you under 30 hours, so that because of the Affordable Care Act and other things with that. So my goodness, that's certainly difficult. 40,000 students of this 72,000 enrolled in post-secondary. 58% were still enrolled in 1 year. So this is some statistics we've seen very similar to this before. Roughly 42% of those that entered post-secondary left or finished if it was a 1 year. after 1 year of it. So 20,000 of the 35,055 who enrolled immediately after graduation. 3,514 had completed a certificate degree within 3 years. So I think 3 years is a little early. It typically would be 4 years anyway if they did. So, but I think that's a graphic just kind of is telling why Tennessee is driving some changes. One of the things that they include in their slide is, of course, Tennessee Promise. And they are calling it grades 13 and 14, and this is the first 2 years of post-secondary education, which can be at a junior college, can be in a trade school or something like that we're talking about, community college, technical institutes. So a good number of students are going to have this opportunity also. I thought this was very interesting that they make this point too. We're talking about raising the bar for instruction to students and their requirement or the answer to that. And here's a couple examples that they use. In 2004, with 11th grade writing, 72% of the students were proficient. In 2012, that was up to 92%. In Algebra 2, the TCAP, which hasn't been in place very long, now in the first year, 30.8% in 2011. By 2014, 47.9%. Now, sometimes the percentages do not look large, but when you look at that, approximately 100,000 additional Tennessee students are on grade level in math compared to 2010. That's a significant number of people when you consider the number of students. And more than 57,000 additional Tennessee students are on grade level in science than compared to 2010. So, are improving. And this is one the state uses a whole lot. This is your NAEP from 2013, where Tennessee, if you remember, became the largest growth on the National Assessment of Educational Progress. This is a private assessment, not Tennessee. It's given all over the country. It's one of those that's tossed around when you talk about how's the United States comparing to some international and other things that are going on. So Tennessee, people are looking at Tennessee and what we're doing and how we moved from down in the pack to being the fastest growing. We do not have the highest NAEP scores, but we have the fastest growing scores. We'll have students that'll take NAEP again. Now, let me explain to you just very quickly about NAEP. NAEP, when a student in, say, David Urey Elementary School, they may, if they're selected to give a section of NAEP test, they'll pick randomly a certain number of students that'll take maybe only one section of science. It's not an entire assessment. You don't take it in all the subject matters or anything like that. It's called sampling. And that's what NAEP does all over the country, is sampling, and then they combine it together. You do not get a report back on those students, no school reports or anything like that, because they really do not test enough students. They do not try to give reports back in that about that student growth, but they combine it for state scores and U.S. scores. And so Tennessee was, again, the fastest growing, which is something to brag about. Here's another thing that they point out in this slide. So what can we do about achievement gaps? And that's achievement gaps can be our socioeconomic gaps, could be African American gaps, what it's talking here. But an interesting thing in this particular slide, as you begin to look at that one, our African American students made gains that were also the fastest improving in the nation among their peers. And what we're talking about here, here's your line, your net gains across 4th to 8th grade math and reading compared with 2011. So we've not only done well in moving the whole group, Tennessee has done very well in moving groups of students that would be under the No Child Left Behind waiver gap closure type students. So Tennessee's done that.
Mr. Odom, I just want to point out that when we go to Capitol Hill and we talk to legislators, one of the things that they throw back at us when we want to say the NAEP scores show the value of public education and the value of what we're doing is the lobbyists on the other side say, well, not everybody takes that test. There's only select people who take that test, and they don't all take the same test. And what you've said about the statistical sampling and the level playing field across the nation is so very important because it validates the NAEP findings as opposed to discounting them. And I just wanted to emphasize that again, because it's something that those that oppose public education, or at least want to find alternatives to it, they're using that specific statistical sampling issue as one of the challenges to the NAEP results.
Sampling is very accurate. Back in another life, even when I was in college and BS, I did have industrial technology, mathematics, and all too, and they sampling. I can remember some of the early statistics on it, and sometimes, in some instances, the sampling results were more accurate than trying to check all. Now, we've got some electronic checking now where machines do the checking, which is probably a little bit different world than what you talked about, where you were visually people having to check. But sampling is accepted way of measuring. You know, if you're selling a load of corn, you know, you're certainly not going to look at every grain of corn, but you're going to take a sample of that corn. What's the moisture content? You know, is there any mold going on it? What is it? The milk truck unloads, and you take a sample of that milk, not every drop of milk in the thing. So sampling is common, it's used, it's accurate. And so that's what NAEP is based upon. Another thing here that the state's saying, beginning in the 15-16 years, so what's coming up that's different that you need to know about? TNReady will replace the state's TCAP multi-choice only test in reading and math in grades 3 through 11. And will include a variety of question types as well as writing, and we're going to look at that a little bit in a moment. TNReady has been developed by Tennessee educators to better assess student knowledge as well as critical thinking, problem-solving skills. In short, all the things students will need to succeed following high school. So they're going to look at it a little bit more from the old type of testing we do to new assessments, which will change the way that we teach. It will modify that somewhat. So what TNReady is divided into two parts, and we've talked about this. You've already heard some information about that. Part 1 for English Language Arts will replace the state's current writing assessment. This year's, the one that we just finished, will be the last year until they add it back or something. There'll not be a separate writing assessment for students to take. It will be embedded. It will require open-ended written responses in English Language Arts. We'll look at some samples of that in just a moment. So the writing will be drawn from other parts of the assessments, what they'll do, primarily from the English Language Arts. Part 1 for math will include performance tasks in grades 3 through 8. The ones that used to be EOC in high school a little bit, that are really linked specifically to Algebra 1 or Algebra 2 or geometry, which will be new, and we'll look at that also. These performance tests will include open-ended response and be multi-step problems that allow students to demonstrate several skills towards a practical application. And they've included an example, I think, that you'll see what they mean. Part 1 of TNReady will be administered during a window that opens early February and closes in early March. And they've already put out a tentative date, so that's included at what I added at the end of this slide, so you're going to get a chance to see that. And this is in the same time frame we've been doing in February and to March, the current writing. The Part 1 of TNReady will be given in this same time frame. This is the one where we need the computers for, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So here's a slide. What I did is I pulled slides from 2 state presentations. And kind of when it's in color like this, that's the different state presentation. So you can kind of see visually here that they're using. So what about the TNReady English Language Arts reading? All, look at that word. All reading questions will be text dependent and will include informational text as well as literature from the disciplines of English Language Arts, science, social studies, and technical subjects. So what they're saying in that particular case, when they give the English Language Arts test, the text or the parts that students will have to read will come from English Language Arts and those other disciplines. You may read a paper on science, or you may read a paper about social studies, a Founding Fathers document or something, or in technical. And interestingly enough, when the Department of the Army did an assessment on the most difficult reading, and we talk about lexiles or things like that, which is terminology we use sometime in education, they found that technical manuals was the most difficult, the most highest reading level requirement of all of the texts that you see. I can see that in the electronic world today. When you open up that manual about how to work on a piece of equipment or machinery, and certainly in the military, That was what was driving that, and that's what's happening in industry. The majority of the reading scores will be devoted to questions that require students to cite textual evidence. Sounds like law school, Mr. Reed and Ms. McLeod, a little bit. Cite evidence in that case, and tasks will focus on central ideas. So you begin to see there's some things that you'll see as we go through that have not been totally decided. That's still up in the air a little bit. So well, we'll look at some examples. Let me go on if I could. So let's look at the writing, if I could, just a moment. For this one, this is a 10-ready English language arts writing. So what you see, the bullets over there on the left, kind of tells you what will be embedded or what will they look for in the writing. Students will write an extended response based on grade level appropriate complex passage. In other words, they'll pick the passage based upon what grade you're in. The task will be based on a response to at least one text and require students to cite evidence. When you get into high school and some other grades, they're talking about giving students sometimes 2 or 3 texts. One text may be pro and the other one con. It's the kind of thing that you see in magazines. Time magazines will have somebody for and somebody writes against. It's the same thing. It's the thing that we see. But you get in some of the high school when they talk about age appropriate, students may have to talk about which author and why or whatever, what are both ones saying. Year 1 will focus on, and here's what the topics that will be: opinions and argumentative, information, exploratory writing. So that will be the focus in Year 1. Support and elaboration will weigh more heavily than conventions and language. Now let me tell you what that means. What that means is they will not place as much emphasis on commas, periods, punctuations as they do on the student's ability to pick the main idea and from the text about what's trying to be transmitted. So it's not going to be a grammar test as heavily as it will be text dependent as interpretation of what's written. So that's a change some too that you're seeing. So, and these items will be human scored, hand scored. Now and so that's the reason it has to be given in February up to about March, because it will go off. The writing assessment's been hand scored for years. That goes off and it's hand scored, and there's a whole process for doing that. Actually, Measurement Inc. was the company that did much of Tennessee's writing assessment, so they have lots of experience. We actually have teachers in this county that is a second job, have signed up and are readers for Measurement Inc., and they'll send them, and multiple readers read the same students, and they have to get within a certain amount of measure of giving the student the same score. If it doesn't, it has to be read again. So it's rather common practice. They still do not know, so I was telling you some things to be determined. How many sections per part, how long, specifically the rubric and the scoring number of passage per grade level, in other words, 1, 2, weighting of the final score and report design. So there's still, as you can see in this case, some decisions to be made, but the process will be, as you can kind of get a look at. So the sample ELA prompt in 3rd through 5th grade. Now here's a prompt here. Write a 1 to 3 paragraphs is what you were talking about, explanation of how animals use their bodies to sense the world around them. Your explanation must be based on ideas and information that can be found in the animal senses set. They will be given a text to read that somebody's written about animal senses. And they'll read that, and then they write 1 to 3 paragraphs answering that question, how animals use their bodies to sense the world around them. And as part of their answer, they'll have to reference back to that text, what sentence, where did it say that's supported. And we'll see an example that may do that better. So again, that's just good writing processes that you're looking at. That's 3rd through 5th grade. So expectations pretty high for our younger students there too. Now, what about math and fluency in this case? Fluency will be assessed as detailed in the standards without a calculator in grades 3 through 6. A lot of teachers were glad to see this because we thought we got kids too dependent, couldn't do the mental multiplication table anymore, some things like that. So I think that's a good move back to not do a calculator starting out, that you learn, memorize your addition tables, your fractions, your multiplication tables, those things you just take for granted. Calculators will be permitted in grades 7 through 11, pretty much throughout the test. But all math tests will have a calculator and a non-calculator section on Part 2. Part 2 is the one that's given, is primarily a multiple choice type. We'll look at that in just a minute. That's the one that's given at the time we have been having TCAP. Late April, high school will be early May, end of course time. So there'll be some with and without calculators there. So again, they still got to determine how it looks and the overall weight of the fluency in math. How many points does that particular part earn you? Okay, here's a question for you. Now this is a 5th grade sample question that would be, and I won't read that to you. So there are A, B, C, D, E. There are 5 questions based upon that. Now, we talk about applying it to a real world. I've stood before you before and said you're not going to see in the test, and they've been disappearing the last 2 or 3 years also, you're not going to see 10 problems that says add these 10 problems, multiply these 10 problems. You're not going to see separate sets of problems for kids to do that. You're going to find the math problem embedded in some problem or solution that you might be having there. First one, a 5th grader to write an equation and allow you to find the volume of a box of sugar cubes for a sweet delight. Do you remember the old volume for a cube situation? Length times width times height. And that's kind of the thing that they're looking for there. Can the student do that? And then you've got cost factor, you've got dollars and cents, and this could be multiple questions or it could be separated into parts of questions. That part we really do not know. I did work them all out. If y'all want to know, I can share what it is. There are
taught math.
Sir?
You taught math.
I did, but I mean, I just think it's going to be tough for a lot of 5th grade kids to do.
Yeah, for a lot of adults.
You know,
school boards.
but in all honesty, that's a problem. If you went to work somewhere, you know, how many can you get in a box, and which is the best box? I mean, you can go a long way, but it's a real world problem. So this would be a Part 1 type assessment that may have to be hand scored, because you're going to have to look at that formula, because it might not be length, width, height, LWH. It could, you could use other combinations, still be correct. But you're looking for that multiplying the 3 sides together. Certainly in a cube, but since it's a cube, I mean, if they're really a bright child, they might say just side A cubed. It's another way of saying it at a higher level, but I don't know how many 5th graders can say that, because in a cube, the length, the width, and the height's all the same, right? So you could say just letter side cubed. So, but both answers could very well be correct. See, that's what we're saying. There are multiple answers, and you'd have to look at that. Okay, we'll move on. The second part of 10 Ready will replace the current TCAP test for math and English language arts in April, May, and we'll see the window for that. This portion will ask students to select responses for multiple types of questions. Performance on Part 1 and Part 2 will be combined into a single composite score for each student. When students take the test in February and early March, we will not get a score back. The score will only come back after they finish Part 2, and they put the 2 scores together, and we'll get 1 score back, 1 proficiency rating and score. So the Part 1 does not stand by itself. So we're going to wonder, for a while, but we'll not know the score until it's over. So that you can kind of begin to see that. And then here's their note to it. This part of test will be administered online in all districts where the vast majority of schools have adequate instructional technology. So the state's intention is that there'll be another thing that'll show in a minute, I think. Part 1 has to be online. Part 2, the later one can be a little bit of both or something in that, but they prefer the online for that one. So the question types that you'll see, there'll be the multiple type in Part 2 will be interactive, they'll be open-ended again, evidence-based, and selected response. It was some interesting things when you allowed multiple ways to answer a problem. And some of our students in that were handicapped special ed, they will very often draw a picture of a solution to it, of what that problem is saying. And interestingly enough, in some of the early studies and cases where they did, some of those students were scoring higher than some of our very brightest students, because the brighter students would read the question, didn't do anything by hand, worked out in their head and said, this is the answer, and very often didn't read the question well enough and missed the answer. Whereas the kid that spent time drawing out the picture and did it got the right answer. But you may have a situation where they have to draw the model and provide the numerical answer too. In those cases, there may be partial credit. So another thing to be worked out, what questions, how much partial credit, can you get in some of those. So that's kind of the difficulty that you see. So their statement is, students will be asked to ask questions at varied question types such that they can demonstrate their knowledge in different ways. So it's not a one answer fits all in this type of question generally. Now here's one for you. These types of questions ask students to move and manipulate items. They will literally be able to, using their mouse on the computer screen, they'll have to draw the remainder of this based upon the conditions that's being done. So move around graphics, they're going to have, it's kind of like Word, it's going to be like other things where they can draw. You start out with one line there, vertices 5'4" and 5'9", and if you'll look there, that line is actually 5 units long. As we kind of do this and look at it, it says use the Connect Line tool to draw the remaining sides of the pentagon. That's how many sides? 5, right? Pentagon. At least 2 sides each have a length of 5 units, and at least one side has to have a length of 8 units. So that would be a problem. I can tell you how I would solve it. Again, there's not just one answer. My solution to solve it, I would draw my 8 units across here and go up 5 more. I will have gotten 2 sides of 5, 1 base of 8, and now where I join the other 2 for the pentagon could be over here, or it could bend down here. As long as it's 5-sided, it'll still be a pentagon, and I would still have 2 sides of 5 and 1 side of 8. So you see how many different answers? It's just virtually unlimited in the number of correct answers to that. The one thing that kids will have to realize, if you try to draw a diagonal line as your 5 or 8, that's problematic because, again, since you've got your little boxes or squares, the hypotenuse or an angle across it is longer than either of 2 sides. So it'd be very difficult to hand draw a 5 unit at an angle per se. So they'll probably have to do it. So you see what I'm talking about there in that? But again, not one answer, but many answers are possible in this one, and all of them be correct. Here is an open-ended question that students type an answer in where it says, what is the main idea of paragraph 4? Type your answer in the space provided. So this is one of the reasons why Mr. Luker and everybody has to work, what kind of typing skills do we have? What kind of keyboarding? So students, are going to have to type their paragraph to type what is the main idea and how they word that. Again, this would have to be a hand-scored item, basically. So they would get a box and they would be typing into that box. They don't give us a grade level for this, but this would be fairly low down. I mean, it would be just in elementary, I'm sure. Depending upon the question, but that's another style of question. Here's another question. These types of questions are usually 2-part. Ask students to support their answer. Part B of the question typically requires the students to choose a piece of evidence using the text to support their answer. Now, this slide came with those 2 things marked. Part A is, what is the central idea of the passage? Now, the passage is at the bottom if you want to read that passage. And then part B is, select the detail from the passage that supports the central idea. So you're asked to support that. I hope myself that this is a wrong answer because I don't think that answer is right. If they mark the right answer, I think it's incorrect. And I'll tell you why. You look at it. See what you think. And they're not saying it was, they're just showing you how you would mark it. The paragraph is short. If you selected B, the main idea is adolescence is a difficult transition into a new life, and you highlight it, and you have a tool that'll let you highlight. You highlight the last sentence there that you also see in green. What in that sentence tells you that this is an adolescent child? Now, the paragraph talks about the child swimming with their parents. It may be a 22-year-old child swimming with their parents. So I don't think that could be an answer. See, I don't think that's the answer for that one in support. I think probably a better one might be A, the C is a place of danger, because you sense as you go down and you begin to look at it, the highlighted line in the bottom, I sensed that it had passed some boundary, it entered a world that I did not belong. Or up in there where he's talked about it, he couldn't see the bottom. That sort of thing is danger. But it's not necessarily easy, but it's little bitty nuances that students are going to be asked to call upon. Detail. So you follow what I'm saying? It's not going to be an easy test by any means. Okay. All right, here's another one. Math. Multiple choice, multiple select. These are the questions. This could be, this is not algebra. It's fractions and signed numbers. Ask students to select the right answer either by selecting one correct answer from many or selecting multiple correct answers from the options. You looked at those. Is there more than one correct in that one? Yes, it is. Sure is. Actually, the first answer would be a -7. You've got the second answer would result in a -7. The third answer there will result in a -7. So the student, and here's the part that it's not totally nailed down yet, or how that'll be treated. Can a student get partial credit for 1 and 2, or will they have to get all 3? Because question number 4, 2 negatives times each other is a positive, so that would be a +7, of course. And 7 to the -1 is 1/7. That's just another way of indicating the fraction. So the last 2 answers are not a -7. The first 3 are -7, but we're really not sure whether the kid gets partial credit or has to pick all 3. But see, that's so different than what they've been taking. Because they've been taking, pick out the answer. Now, every once in a while we saw all of the above or none of the above, but we have not been experiencing multiple correct answers in your multiple choice, which means the child has to have a greater depth of understanding, obviously, in this one. So in order to get students ready, teachers ready, and everybody, what's Tennessee going to do? What you want to do, you want to find out what the child knows or has learned. You don't want test bias to mask what the child really knows. So one of the things that we're going to find us having to do this next year is students are going to have to practice with these kind of questions, and teachers are going to have to teach with these kind of questions so that you can really find out, so students begin to look for multiple correct answers. They begin to look at the question, the problems differently, the solutions differently, and practice that. So the state is providing item samplers. Item samplers are kind of what I've been showing you. That would be some of those slides that you saw as an item and how it might look on the test. Each standard will have an example question that reflects the design of the 10 Ready test question. So they're going to start out with 1 to 2 or so and add more item samplers as time goes on. And this is online, web-based. Kids can see it at home or anywhere else. And they're also going to build in practice tests. There are many practice tests that will be available for both Part 1 and Part 2 of 10 Ready. Same platform as the actual test. But again, that's very good, again, because it allows students to practice that assessment. Yes, sir?
Just make those available to the classroom, the practice test?
And they're going a little bit beyond that, and so that's what I want to share with you a little bit. Here's the state, and I'm reading from the state statement. Because the item sampler platform is web-based, both teachers and students can access it outside of school, after hours, or on weekends. So when these samples are put up, you can look at them and see what they look like. So again, your idea is to minimize this test bias. So teachers already actually started in the month of May being able to go in it's called the MICA platform. It's very similar to, most of you are familiar with Word, you know, Microsoft Word. Microsoft Word lets you underline, it lets you mark through answers, it lets you highlight answers. Honestly, taking the test is, kids learning to do that is a skill in itself too that has to prepare them, I think, for the future. So the MICA platform allows a lot of editing tools or in drawing tools like you had to do the Pentagon. It is going to include those things that students will use to answer their tests. So another idea is kind of the real world situation where are students going, what do they need to know and learn. So indirectly, teachers are going to be teaching a lot of that in addition to the actual content. Has to be. So it should be out there for all of us to see. And it will, here's something like this. Here's an interesting one. And this illustrates what I'm talking about. This is an item sampler and answer questions and view results. If you'll look right up here, you see the tools. You can magnify it, you can highlight, you can mark through it. So this would be like a student was reading this question. Which word describes the line shown in that particular drawing? And so the student may find, what am I looking for? I'm looking for the lines or the words and lines or whatever the student wants to highlight. This student highlighted lines, looks at the picture, and it said, well, that can't be one of the answers. So this student marks out that answer. And those actually are two parallel lines. They're not perpendicular because they're not intersecting lines. They're not horizontal lines in this particular case, but they are parallel lines. So again, students can use the tools to help them eliminate answers in answering the assessment. Another thing that will be available, which I think is kind of interesting, you're looking in the MICA platform, item sampler, answer questions, and you can view results. You can see what it looks like, how students responded, what kind of progress they had when they took the assessment or when they tried it. You can see that. This is a student's name. Other software has been doing this all along. We do this. You prove, read 180, other things like that. For years, there have been things in place that students could take an assessment or something, practice. Teacher can go in and look and see how they answered or what they're missing or not missing. It's a good tool. And it would look something like this. And this, what they're saying is, teachers, parents, others could look at this. That their notes to this one is, note that this is linked to an individual student. So the teacher can see how the individual student is progressing. That Nevada Taylor, so you're trying to see between tests 1 and 2, is she progressing, not progressing, how large is that progression on that particular skill. And so this is an English language arts for grade 11, a standard mastery type question. So the nice thing is the tool for them to practice on will also do some tracking to see if the student's progressing and maybe their level of understanding for what it might be. So that's a nice feature that the state's going to furnish, and they're not going to charge us extra for it. It's part of the testing. 10 ready detailed reports for parents and teachers. Teachers and parents want to know how their students are doing in school, where they need to improve. 10 ready assessments will provide students, teachers, and parents with more detailed, accurate, authentic information about each student's progress and achievement in the classroom. So they'll be reporting all along. I don't know whether, probably all of them not printed. Some of it will probably be online, I'm sure. But anyway, that's coming as part of the 10 ready assessment, what they're going to do. So 10 ready, kind of they begin to summarize some of it. 10 ready to be administered online. This gives Tennessee students an opportunity to develop critical technology skills and need for success, and I think you've seen some of that, how they can respond, while also ensuring they do not fall behind their peers in other states where on tests are given. And here's an interesting fact. We have phased in required online testing over the last 4 years, and that was done primarily through the writing, the writing assessment. Many states have been testing online for 15 plus years. While some of this is new to Tennessee, it's not new across the country. Refining 10 Ready with educator involvement. So Tennessee educators, both with K-12 and higher education levels, were involved in the selection process for 10 Ready. They were reviewing the questions. You get teams of teachers together, you take a question, you look at it and try to remove test bias, the appropriateness of this level. So you have teams of people that look at it. Tennessee will make decisions about item selection, test length, composition, scoring. Going forward, an ongoing basis, Tennessee will decide on changes to the test based on changes to Tennessee standards. And Tennessee teachers will be engaged in item development and review, which means as the math, the English language art, they Measurement Inc. in accepting the contract bid had to agree to change their test, alter their test to match whatever Tennessee standards become. That's what that line is basically saying. That was part of the approving process that they had to do. This is a couple of, I think, sayings I like that the state included in theirs, and I certainly agree with that. We've got to prepare students for tomorrow. That's basically what we're saying in this particular case. And now I have added these slides that were from another PowerPoint. This one shows you the test that will be in the 15-16 school year. K2 Pearson SAT 10 is not a required test. AMOs are not taken from that. Not required. We've typically been giving maybe a second grade test there, for kids to practice and kind of get ready to go on. So in 3 through 11, I'll tell you how to read this, and you got, of course, a copy at your seat. They'll be giving 3-8 math. They'll be giving Algebra 1. The red ones are new tests next year. Students will be tested in geometry next year and Algebra 2. We've been testing Algebra 1, Algebra 2. Next year we add geometry. 3 high school courses. Remember, a student has to have 4 math courses in high school. So it's very possible that 3 of them will have a 10 Ready test attached to it. Core math 1, 2, and 3 is an integrated math. That means you have an integration of Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and geometry integrated together. And in our country, we've done mostly Algebra 1, Algebra 2, geometry forever, but you know most of the world uses an integrated math. It's not a bad idea, because what you do, as you can see as you try to solve some of those problems, you've got to have a little understanding of geometry. At the same time, you've got to try to understand some of the math behind it. So by integrating the two, it may actually, and we're looking at it for Rutherford County doing a core 1, 2, 3 math here. Several other progressive districts are looking at the same thing, and there are textbooks for that. They're developing, for that, because it may give the student, one of the things that they really hate is you try to teach them some skill or fact and they don't have an application to it. But if you can bring in the geometry, then you can tie the application very often with the math that you're trying to teach them. So it's not a bad way to do it. In fact, that's the way the world is. It doesn't come out with a problem listed by itself. It's integrated in some way, so it's not bad at all. And Mr. Jordan can probably tell you this, for most kids in high school, the average child in high school, in the mathematics realm, Algebra 2 is the most difficult course that they'll take. Very tough. Your matrices, many of the other things that appear in Algebra 2 are very, very tough. Algebra 1 is certainly tough, but Algebra 2 really raises it to another level. This gives you in Algebra 2, instead of it being 1 year, you get it and done or whatever, you could do it over core 2 and 3. You can stretch out that education for it. Now, certainly some kids will handle it very well as they are now in the way it is. But it does allow you to, as you teach it, as a math teacher, I looked and I said, that's not a bad idea, giving me 2 years to teach Algebra 2, to integrate it over a longer period of time. The old theory is we can learn almost anything. It just takes some longer and more than a lifetime sometimes. But, that's it. But anyway, English language arts, that's what they'll be doing. 3 through 8, Science, Achievement, and EOC. Now, MI is Measurement Inc. That's the company doing it. That was a contract for English language arts. Science, Achievement, EOC is vendor to be determined. That had been Pearson. The state's saying basically we're not married to Pearson anymore. So 3-8, Science, Biology, Chemistry. So we don't know who that vendor will be. At times we talk to them, they're looking hard to see if they can put that online. If it does not, we do not have new science standards in place. It may be as much as 2016-17 for their new science standards. That's what they told us within the last 2 or 3 weeks. So they may even use paper and pencil for elementary science and biology and chemistry. But they're trying to do it where they can do it online. Social studies, again, new achievement, EOC. The social studies this year was the pilot, didn't count. What they're saying in 15-16, social studies will count. That's what they're saying. And the vendors still to be determined. They got really angry with Pearson over the social studies because it started cutting kids off of the assessments. They dropped them. They'd have to try to sign back on. Some of this is timed. So the state got really put out with Pearson because the technology piece on Pearson's end was not working. I also read where, gosh, it was Minnesota or Wisconsin, one of those right up on the border. All of their assessments was done by Pearson online, and it made national news article that it was failing all the time. The connection was there. So they were having a problem with it. So the state is reading that and seeing that, so we don't know yet, to be determined, who will do the social studies achievement, who will do the science. The other tests down there are not something that access is a thing that's that we do Explore and Plan and ACT. Actually, the ACT Corporation is coming out with a new product. It's Access instead of Explore and Plan. It's a renaming and a way to do that. So that again is not something that I think we need to particularly worry about, because Tennessee next year is still going to give Explore and Plan. So that's not going to be different, okay? And those are just other tests. It'd be like NAEP could be listed. There's actually some NAEP next year. Now this is on the state's website. You can go in and look at it. This is the calendar. I've highlighted kind of in yellow. That's the window. So on your printed copy, you should have that highlighted. That's when Part 1 and Part 2s are kind of given. You see the spring traditional for science, but you can kind of see in there that February 8th through March 4th is Part 1, Part 2. You look at April to May, so some could be paper, some could be, depending on what happens with some of the science and some of the other things, but most will probably be online. But that's the windows. And so that's why we've been saying, we've already met with principals and all. In high school, you're not going to be able to shut down while we do EOCs, because EOC is going to go on for weeks. So you're going to have to, some kids are going to the computer lab, take the test. Other kids are going to go on with the instruction program, that sort of thing. So it's going to take more days, because if you have to go to computer and do it, you can't pass out a group of papers and everybody take it between 9 o'clock and 11 o'clock today, because that's not going to happen in the state. There's not enough computers hardly anywhere to do that. So it will be over a period of window time. We're looking at that. Our principals are involved. We've talked to them. Are we better, say that you're in elementary school, are we better to test everybody in 3rd grade math, 4th grade math, 5th grade math, or are we better test 3rd grade in all subjects and then 4th grade in all subjects? We've got to make some decisions about what's the best way to test and how we do that. We haven't decided that yet. We're talking amongst each other. The state doesn't care as long as you fit it within the window. But we need to do what's best for kids and what's the best way to do it. So we're working on that, kind of let you see. I thought you would enjoy this one. This is the state's look at where Rutherford County's preparedness for the online assessment. The bottom one is the network readiness by school. You remember we got the $2 million a couple of years ago, went in, changed bandwidth, put in the routers, that information. The state is saying we're 100% ready to carry 50 megabytes or greater for testing. We're in good shape bandwidth. The top one up there is the graph for about the machines that are Windows 7 or more capable. So why do we ask to do $1 million early? You know, to try to get machines in here, and why are we asking for additional monies? So we are below the minimum number of devices. We knew that. This is just a graphical representation. I added the note over there at the side myself. That one, this note I added to the state's graph. Statewide, 62% of schools were ready or adequate, and this goes all the way back to March of 2014. Now, adequate already. We're up there at 30.4. In other words, when you look over here at this 68, we're not. You see what I'm saying? So rather than 62%, is Rutherford County really that far behind? Yes, we are. You know, we're nowhere near 62% state average of yellow-green put together. That's why we needed additional devices and why we needed the funding for those devices. Okay, question? Took a little longer than we thought. That's kind of an overview. Ken Reddy.
With the additional computers that I don't guess they're in, but they're ordered, and we should.
$1 million worth are ordered.
What is the game plan to help these students where they're test ready on the computer?
We have some schools that are really already ready. If it's been within the last few years and we put in Windows 7 machine, and I've got John here who can actually help me with that, we have some schools that would be pretty much ready. Whitworth Buchanan today, most of theirs are, because they were built in the last several years, have Windows 7 or higher. They do need more machines so that they can cycle the kids through. There's not enough there, but the ones that are there are compliant. So it really varies a lot from school to school. The schools that have been in existence for some time, they're Windows XP or something, are not ready. And we have some schools that virtually all of them need replacing, right, John? You know, so that's where we are. So we have it down by school, by number of devices. And remember, we had to test half the grade. It's by grade. In other words, what is your highest grade? How many does it take to test half? Where are they in the building? How can we use them, or do we need to be replaced? And that's what Steve and the rest of the technology people are working from, is that assessment. We had to turn that assessment into the state, and that's how the state arrived at that graph. They took our data about what we said we had, because we know what we have, and that was the graph they come up with, and it basically says you're not ready.
There's one thing that jumped out at me as you went through this. There is so much that is different about the test that will be in front of the student than any test that the student has seen previously, that we will inevitably face a strong public outcry that in our preparation for this, we'll be teaching to the test. And I think that you hit on a statement there along the way. We are not teaching to the test because this test is more reflective of what the student's future will be. We're not teaching to the test, we're teaching to tomorrow.
We're teaching to the skills that allow you to solve these problems of tomorrow and this test.
Yeah.
Because you can't. I mean, you saw a sampling of question types. What they're telling us is, did they ever said how many types? Is it 5, 6 different types, like in math, elementary? I mean, there's lots of types. Some are graphical, some are more written.
It's going to be important from a public relations and in an informative way for us to get the message out that this is teaching to what our students will face tomorrow. The other thing that I wanted to bring up is in testing, I hear criticism of, well, once we're done with TCAP, throw in the towel, we're done with the year. What else is going on in school the last 2 weeks, the last 3 weeks after TCAP? And in the spirit of that frustration, I asked the question. I got an interesting answer, and I wanted to bring it to light with the board in the context of this discussion, because it will weigh in when we talk about how are we going to structure testing in the individual buildings. I found out that at Stewart's Creek Elementary, when you're done with TCAP, the next Monday morning, you go to your next grade level. You go to your next classroom. You go to your next teacher for next school year. and you start becoming that level of academic student as opposed to the academic student that you were when you took TCAP. It's an innovative concept. Mr. Zago put it in place and got adoption from his staff. I think it's wildly successful. I think that it's incredibly innovative, and I think that it's really something that we should take a look at because it gives us what we talk about is there in testing, and it is there. The test is important. It creates a certain level of anxiety and an urgency in the lesson. But as soon as that test is over, now in a low-stress environment, we can start the relationship between teacher and student and build what we need for in the fall to be incredibly effective and put in place education on day one and hit the ground running if we've done some preliminary work in those final weeks of school after this standardized testing. Mr. Zago, share additional thoughts, if you will.
You may want him to do a night of that, because it's a process of how they do it.
I think it's outstanding. I think it's something we should look at. In practical application, it would mean that we would have to test a portion of third, fourth, fifth, grade in order to be able to cycle them all through. When they finish their testing, then they move up or something of that nature. This would complicate it, but I think it's worth our effort to take a look at that.
I'd be very interested in that as well. I'm wondering what Mr. Luker back there will do with his 8th graders the last 3 weeks of the year when they... Good idea. Good plan. That's why you're the new principal. You've got an idea. That will be innovative, all right. And I'm sure Mr. Rick Powell will just love you to death for that.
The first year Mr. Zago did that, Mr. Gill and I got lots of telephone calls about students not being with their teacher the last week or two. It was somewhat traumatic, but honestly, the parents there now want it and say it. They meet their teacher for the next year early, so there's not anxiety when they start back in the fall. The teacher's already met the kids, except for new kids coming in and all. So it's an interesting concept, but if you want to hear it from, we need to let him kind of, her and maybe the principal there now talk about how it works and what they hear.
Other questions for Mr. Odom about 10 Ready? Excellent presentation. Thank you.
Well, it's the state slides, but I think it's interesting for you to see. And we'll give you more as we get more information.
Okay. All right, insurance update.
Copy of the spreadsheet that Mr. Sandby provides to you after each one of our committee meetings that shows the cost per employee per month. In April, we had a 0.86 or 0.8% increase over last year. That was our medical, and then the medical and on-site clinics, there was a 0.7% increase. Below, you see the number of injuries for the Board of Ed. We had 11 injuries reported in the month of April for our workers' comp on the job injury program.
And these numbers affect our budget.
They do.
It was good to see, though, that your on-the-job injuries for 14-15 was considerably less than 13-14, so maybe the training is helping.
There was one particular person under the old workers' comp program that carried over, and there was a very large process of surgeries for that particular employee that accelerated those costs.
Any questions for Ms. Barnes?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I shared this, I believe, with Mr. Young and maybe a couple of other people earlier. We were just talking about it, but my church has sent out a call to a music director, and we haven't voted on it yet, so I don't know how that'll turn out. But the package, salary and so forth, but part of the package was for insurance for he and his a family of 5, as well, soon to be 5. At any rate, the insurance part of that package was $12,000 a year. And that just, it reiterates what I guess everybody here has said. And then Mr. Young made the point repeatedly and very well about what families and this board is facing and all our employees. It's just a serious problem as to how we're going to cover our employees, how they're going to cover themselves, whether we drop spouses, which I think we've done that now if they have a plan to go to. It's serious, past serious. Thank you.
Well, it's a simple process to find out what insurance costs these days. You can go on healthcare.gov and put in your information, and it will give you the opportunity to look at different carriers and different plans. Blue Cross Blue Shield has 37 different option plans with 3 different networks, and the price varies substantially.
And I think it's appropriate to mention, as far as our teachers and staff are concerned, in the case of this person that I'm mentioning, if we had offered him, and we have offered him the job, I have no idea whether that will happen or not. I'm not saying anything about that, but if we had offered him that job at the salary, which was a good salary that we offered him, and said, take care of your own insurance, he would have been unable to do that. He would have had to take a pay cut from his present job, a considerable pay cut, because whatever we offered him would have been less $12,000. And that, I'm pretty sure to all of us in this room, that's a lot of money. $12,000 is. And that's a year. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but we've got school teachers and staff members that face this every single year.
We already know Blue Cross Blue Shield's announcing that they're going to see a 36 to 60% increase next year. So it's not getting any better. It's only going
We're going to have this. You said it 2 or 3 months ago. We're going to have the same conversation this time next year, and the teachers in the county commission who have been repeatedly warned of that, and of course they have employees that fall under this plan. It's not just the school board.
Continue to be an issue, no doubt.
I got one piece of good news I'll just share.
Yes, sir.
While I was eating lunch today, I ran into Joseph Womack, who is the fellow that's kind of the author that does our school station. We track our teachers in service. He said, I just emailed up to your Willie, to people over in the teacher center, what your statistics are for teachers doing in service. How much have they done? And so I made a copy of his email and put it in yours. I thought it was really interesting to see. Since 2004-05, in the last 10 years, our teachers have put in 680,864.3 hours in service. And look at the number of people there, the registrations. But even for 14-15, which is the first one up there, it's interesting to see Rutherford County, we train teachers and we have a lot of opportunities for them. We offered 1,822 professional development opportunities for teachers, and our teachers attended if you take each person, 83,629.5 hours of professional development this year alone. So that's what your teachers are doing this because they want to know more. They don't stop at the 12 hours that's required. They just, so many of them get 25, 30, they want to know more. So that's just a real compliment to our teachers and our administrators out there in the buildings that are using this and utilizing it. Good information.
And that you made this available too.
I was glad to hear it. I didn't know we were tracking it as well.
Tennessee Legislative Network, Mr. Hodge.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think right now things are pretty calm. I'm sure there's something going on out there, but the report tonight, I don't have anything additional other than like to make mention that everybody knows earlier this week, the city and county both were recognized as 23rd in the nation as far as the school system goes, and I think that's, Mr. Oldham and staff, students and all that, they're to be commended for this. I will say on a legislative part of it that so far we've achieved this without any vouchers for charter schools. So. Yes, sir. I hope we keep it that way, so I just make mention of that. Also, Mr. Holliday, I think he went to a speech a week or two ago. He may want to elaborate on that. But was it in regard to charter schools or vouchers or?
Well, they really didn't talk that much about charters or vouchers because they use the term school choice, but we know the code words that is. But it was Americans for Prosperity and the Tennessee chapter of that, and they held a meeting. Senator Ketron and Representative Terry were both there and shared some comments. And in thinking about that, and we had a board meeting that night. I was very late, didn't get to hear the comments that they made, but just had conversation primarily with Representative Terry afterwards. But it's important, I think, for us to be aware and a part of those organizations. As I was thinking about this, and Mr. Hodge gave me kind of a heads up that he might throw this over to me, whether it's Americans for Prosperity or whether it's the ALEC organization, the American Legislative Exchange Council, one of the things that Senator Ketron reported was that he would be in attendance at the ALEC conference coming up nationally here in late July. And so I looked into that a little bit. Turns out he's the state chairman, one of the two state chairmen for ALEC here in Tennessee. And no doubt that's one of the motivating factors for him to go to that conference. But these are the organizations that in large part are writing the model legislation that our legislators are pushing. And so for us to be informed, aware, and involved in Americans for Prosperity, in ALEC, and other organizations like this, I think it's something that we need to think about. It's not an easy venue. They don't agree with the truth that we know to be the case, that public education is the way that over 90% of America's youth are educated, and it's the best way. It is the best opportunity for a student to be able to distinguish themselves. It's absolutely essential. So that's something that we need to keep in mind.
They need to all ask themselves, where would they be today without public education?
I think if you've been reading the paper, you see thousands and thousands of jobs coming into Rutherford County, and I think the reason why those jobs are coming to Rutherford County is because of our school systems and how they are performing. I mean, just meeting after meeting, I see evidence of that. So I think that's something we need to definitely keep in the back of our minds as we go forward with some of these challenges we got coming up, testing and all that. I think we're doing the right thing. We're on the right path, and we just got to continue.
Well, in any chamber talk that you'll experience, that will be one of the first things they mention, is that our public education system here is, and of course tax rate is such an attractive, so attractive to these corporations and the workforce. So, I think we'll continue to be frustrated, but we need to continue the conversation and work towards what's best for our children, our students. Do you have anything to add, Mr. Hodge?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Anything regarding the Federal Relations Network, Mr. Holliday?
I spoke with Peter Oppenheim, who's the staff attorney for the Senate Health, Education, and Labor Pensions Committee. He said that it is possible that around June 23rd to 25th, we may see a full floor debate on the Senate version of reauthorization for elementary and secondary education. It's not guaranteed by any means. It could be that it's after the 4th of July break, but currently they are trying to get it scheduled into the calendar right there where we'll have our second meeting of this month. And so we perhaps should be aware and watching that. We talked about the possibilities of, what this legislation could do and what it would not do, and the imperfections in it. And there are imperfections in any legislation, but it's certainly better than endorsing the current circumstance, which says that the Secretary of Education gets to personally negotiate whatever he so desires with each individual state. We need to get off of that plan and into something that the legislation authorizes, and that's very important. I'll leave it at that.
Any questions for Mr. Holliday? Okay, we'll move to general discussion. Anybody have anything?
I want to ask about the schedule, just to make sure that we have a June 10th budget. Is that still the plan? Okay, and then again the 17th and 22nd. All of those are if needed, and
It will.
could well be altered. That plan.
We'll probably dictated by what goes on at
The budget tonight for the 10th anyway. I noticed now that we have, this is the official laminated Joyce Michaels official whoop-de-doop schedule here. And she has something on here for Tuesday, June 16th, board work session. Is that no longer, did you change that? Okay, okay, so it's the following week. I think I have that on my, okay, so the 16th, and you want to take it from here, the 16th, we are going to a meeting on the 16th.
That's right.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay,
I was going to,
okay, thank you.
that's your introduction to.
That's the introduction to.
As we talked, it's Tuesday night, would like to see all board members, if possible, for the public hearing on the budget at the courthouse on the 16th, and it will begin promptly, I'm sure, at 7 p.m. So if we could be all hands on deck, that would be. There may be several people there to make comments, or there may be a few. I suspect there'll be several faces there in the courthouse, and if we all could be there, that would I think be very good in support of our initiative, our budget. Yes, sir, Mr. Holliday.
We have had a long meeting tonight, and I don't want to go too far into this, but in the casual conversation that I had with Representative Terry, there were a couple of things that came out that I thought the board should be aware of, and they didn't really fit in the legislative update. They're more appropriate in general board comments. He spoke specifically about his meetings with the REA and with the Retired Teachers Association. They had a certain impact on him. I think the board needs to take note of that, because we certainly want to have influence, and perhaps it's best to have influence through those partner organizations where we're frustrated by our own representation. I don't know why that is. It frustrates me again that that's the case, but I'm certainly going to take note of it and say, okay, if that's who is affecting your decisions, then so be it. We called a meeting with the Murfreesboro City School Board and had all the legislators there and expressed all kinds of thoughts about education. Didn't seem to really ring true with any of the legislators, and yet Representative Terry really took notice of the meeting that he had with the REA and the retired teachers. I thought it was worth noting. He also gave me a piece of information that I was not aware of. He said in the conversation about, and this is not an issue for Rutherford County Schools, but it is education. In the conversation about whether or not the state of Tennessee should pay or should allow students that do not have legal citizenship status in the state of Tennessee to have in-state tuition and higher education. He said, you ought to know that half the cost is paid by the student at the in-state tuition level. So what it costs for that student to be educated at the University of Tennessee or at MTSU at an in-state tuition cost, half of that is paid by the tuition. The other half is paid 40% by the state and 10% by some other means. And he said it falls into a lot of different categories. But that was part of his analysis as he thought about that issue. I thought that that was worth knowing. I also listened to him as he told me about 2 accomplishments that he really felt like that he had something to do with. The impact of textbook adoption and the rules for textbook adoption. He told me stories about being in the room and being present along the lines of, if we don't do this textbook adoption committee, then we'll carry the legislation over here. And so, that being the case, I think Representative Terry may indeed deserve, some acknowledgement for those efforts in that regard, because the improvements in textbook adoption and the transparency there is something that Rutherford County is responsible for. Not necessarily this board, but citizens in our county have pushed that, and I appreciate and acknowledge that. The other thing was, it was important to him in the Spivey legislation that went through that said that we're going to adopt new state standards. He wanted the word repeal Common Core in there. He was not able to get repeal in there, but he fought very, very hard to get rescind in there. All of these things related to education fall under general board comments. It was from my interaction with him, and I thought I'd share it with the board.
Anybody else?
We need to get a number of our legislators to go to the Rutherford County Retired Teachers Association meetings if it had a profound effect on Representative Terry. They meet every Tuesday. Well, on Tuesdays. I'm a member. I'll be glad to let them know the next time they meet. I'm sure they'll be right over there. North Boulevard Church of Christ. You can get free food, too. I'm sure Senator Ketron will be right there. And others.
Anybody else? Ms. Joyce, we're back together again. Remind us.
And a special call meeting on the 18th of June for some reception hearings.
Anybody else?
Make note of the fact that Principal Luker stayed the entire meeting.
Hear, hear.
What a guy. Who's that with you there?
I hope you're taking her out to dinner after.
Fortunately, the camera was not turned on you the entire time. There was a yawn or two. Not while your boss was speaking, of course.
No.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Good meeting, and everyone be safe going home. This meeting stands adjourned.